When war ends, the battlefield does not simply disappear. The smoke clears, the armies retreat, the flags are lowered, but the consequences remain. They settle into homes, into courtrooms, into the lives of widows and children who must carry names that history refuses to forget. Reinhard Heydrich was not merely another official in Hitler's regime. He was one of its most feared architects, a man whose intelligence, discipline, and ruthless efficiency earned him immense power within the Third Reich. When he died in 1942, the regime mourned him as a fallen hero. But history would remember him very differently. And when Germany collapsed 3 years later, it was not only the Reich that fell. His family fell with it. This is the story of what happened after the applause ended, after the salutes stopped, when a widow and her children were left to navigate a defeated nation determined to distance itself from everything their name represented. Reinhard Heydrich died in June 1942. Yet the shadow he cast did not fade with his burial in Berlin. His widow, Lina, and their children remained permanently bound to one of the most powerful and feared men of the Nazi state. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, they lost far more than status and territory. They lost protection, privilege, and the insulated world that had once revolved around Hitler's inner circle. What followed was not dramatic in the way war had been dramatic. There were no marching columns, no flags, no orchestras. Instead, there were interrogations, legal files, denazification forms, and the slow unraveling of status. The Heydrich name, once synonymous with authority, became something many Germans preferred to avoid speaking aloud. To understand what became of the family after 1945, we must return to late 1930. Heydrich met Lina von Osten at a rowing club event in Kiel. Their connection was immediate and intense. Lina, politically committed and already sympathetic to the National Socialist cause, saw in Heydrich both ambition and opportunity. He, recently engaged elsewhere, soon entangled himself in scandal. In early 1931, a naval inquiry was launched against him for becoming engaged to Lina while still formally committed to another woman. Admiral Erich Raeder dismissed Heydrich from the Navy in April of that year, ending his promising military career in disgrace. That dismissal proved decisive. With his naval path closed, Heydrich turned toward politics. Encouraged by Lina's enthusiasm and her early party membership, he joined the Nazi Party in 1931. Within weeks, he entered the SS, an organization still young, but rapidly consolidating power. There, his cold precision and organizational talent drew attention. He advanced quickly, building intelligence structures that would become central to the regime's machinery of control. Their marriage in December 1931 marked more than a domestic union. It cemented a partnership grounded in ideological conviction and ambition. As Heydrich rose, Lina stood beside him, hosting, organizing, cultivating connections within elite SS circles. Together, they embodied the image of a loyal National Socialist family. By May 1942, Heydrich had been serving as acting Reichsprotector of Bohemia and Moravia since September 1941. In Prague, he ruled with calculated severity, suppressing resistance and tightening security. On May 27, 1942, Czech resistance agents trained in Britain ambushed his open-top car. Though initially surviving the explosion, he suffered complications following surgery. Infection spread rapidly. On June 4, 1942, he died in Prague. The Nazi regime responded with brutal reprisals. Entire communities, most notably Lidice and Ležáky, were destroyed in retaliation. But beyond the public violence, a private transformation unfolded. Lina was left a widow at 31, with 4 children, Klaus, Heider, Silke, and Marta. Hitler personally confirmed the family's right to the estate at Jungfernbrechen in occupied Czechoslovakia. The property symbolized Heydrich's stature within the SS hierarchy. During the remaining war years, it became the center of family life. Life there carried a strange duality, privilege mixed with isolation. Lina hosted gatherings for SS families and maintained close ties with the regime's elite. She preserved her husband's memory with unwavering loyalty. In her world, he was not a symbol of terror, but a fallen servant of Germany. Yet history was moving toward collapse. By early 1945, Soviet forces advanced toward Prague. The stability of the estate vanished almost overnight. Lina gathered her children and fled westward toward Bavaria, joining the massive tide of German civilians escaping the Red Army. They crossed into what soon became the American occupation zone. By the end of 1945, the family settled temporarily in Aschau im Chiemgau. The contrast with their former life was stark. Gone were servants, estates, and political protection. In their place were modest stipends, temporary housing, and reliance on relatives. The social world that had once revolved around SS hierarchy had disintegrated. A new struggle began, quieter but relentless. From 1946 onward, Lina faced denazification proceedings in Bavaria. Tribunals examined her early membership in the Nazi Party, her marriage to one of its most senior officials, and the material benefits she had received during the Third Reich. Lina had joined the party in 1931 before Hitler came to power. She later described this as youthful idealism, an expression of hope for national revival. Investigators were unconvinced. Early membership suggested commitment rather than coercion. Her close association with SS elites indicated proximity to power and privilege. Lina firmly rejected these interpretations, insisting she had played no role in her husband's work and had remained politically uninvolved. In 1949, she was classified as a Mitläuferin, a category defined as a follower rather than a major offender or active perpetrator. This spared her from severe penalties, but financial hardship remained. The Jungfern-Breschan estate was lost. She possessed no formal profession. Survival required persistence. She then pursued recognition as the widow of a German officer, seeking eligibility for a state pension. The legal question was technical, yet explosive. Was Reinhard Heydrich, despite his SS rank, legally eligible for recognition under military pension statutes at the time of his death? In 1954, a Munich court issued its ruling. The judges concluded that, despite his SS position, Heydrich's status within the state security apparatus qualified under existing public service and military pension regulations. Lina was therefore entitled to a widow's pension. The decision ignited controversy. Critics argued that one of the regime's most feared security officials should not be granted the symbolic status of a fallen soldier. Supporters countered that the court had applied strict legal definitions, not moral judgments. The ruling became emblematic of broader tensions within post-war Germany, between legality and justice, between technical compliance and historical responsibility. Some historians later questioned whether Lina's portrayal of herself as politically passive influenced the outcome. Others argued that the courts were constrained by existing statutes that left no room for moral evaluation. Whatever the deeper debate, the pension provided financial stability during a time when many former Nazi families struggled in obscurity. By the early 1950s, Lina had completed the formal stages of denazification. She could legally work, travel, and receive state support. After the Munich court confirmed her pension rights in 1954, Lina Heydrich stepped into a new phase of life, not free from controversy, but steadier than the uncertain years that had followed Germany's defeat. Financial security gave her breathing room, and with that stability, she chose distance. The family eventually relocated to the island of Fehmarn, off the northern coast of West Germany. Windswept, quiet, and far removed from the political centers of Berlin or Munich, the island offered anonymity, or at least the illusion of it. There, Lina opened a small guest house known as Pension Imbria. It became both her livelihood and, in many ways, her final stage. Running the pension placed her once again at the center of a social circle. Tourists came and went. Locals became regulars. Former acquaintances from before 1945 occasionally appeared at her door. Several accounts suggest that Lina maintained contact with families who had once belonged to the SS elite. Though the Reich had vanished, certain networks endured in quieter forms. Through it all, her loyalty never wavered. She consistently portrayed herself as a casualty of post-war judgment, a widow burdened by a name others feared to speak. In interviews, she focused on the difficulties of raising children alone, on the loss of property, on the years of scrutiny. What she did not dwell on were the broader consequences of the regime her husband had served at the highest levels. In 1976, she published her memoir, Life with a War Criminal. The title alone drew attention. Critics quickly argued that the book offered a selective and incomplete portrayal of Reinhard Heydrich's documented role within the Reich Security Main Office. Lina emphasized his private virtues, discipline, devotion to family, personal courage, while questioning or minimizing the documented scale of his public authority and responsibility. Historians are not divided about Heydrich's documented responsibility. but they differ in how they interpret Lina's motives. Some believe the memoir reflects genuine conviction, a woman who never re-examined her beliefs. Others view it as calculated self-defense, a final attempt to reshape memory. Perhaps it was both, loyalty intertwined with self-preservation. Public interest in Lina resurfaced during the 1970s and 1980s. Journalists traveled to Fehmarn to meet the woman who had stood beside one of the most feared men of the Third Reich. Among them was American journalist Nancy Dougherty, whose interviews later informed the Crime Reads feature, Interview with the Hangman's Wife. Those who spoke with Lina described a woman sharp in memory and firm in tone. She defended her husband without hesitation. According to Dougherty's accounts, Lina insisted that history had distorted his image, that context had been ignored, that he had been judged too simply by later generations. Observers noted her refusal to reinterpret the past. Time had not softened her position. Her interviews opened a larger debate. How should societies treat the testimony of individuals who remain loyal to discredited regimes? Some scholars argue that Lina's words provide rare insight into the mentality of families connected to the SS. Others caution that personal narratives must never outweigh archival evidence. Between memory and documentation, truth often fractures. By the early 1980s, Lina's health began to decline. Yet she continued managing her guest house as long as she could. Her final years on Fehmarn passed quietly. Visits from friends, occasional conversations with researchers, the steady rhythm of island life. On August 14, 1985, she died at 73. With her passing, a chapter that had begun in the early days of National Socialism finally closed. She had lived through the rise of the Third Reich, its violent expansion, its collapse, and 4 decades of a divided and rebuilding Germany. To some, Lina symbolizes unwavering loyalty to a disgraced cause. To others, she embodies the tangled aftermath of war, where personal devotion collides with historical responsibility. The children of a name. If Lina's life was defined by defense, her children's lives were defined by distance. The Heydrich children entered post-war Germany carrying a surname inseparable from one of the regime's most powerful figures. The loss of their estate, the public scrutiny of their mother and their father's reputation placed them in a fragile position within a society struggling to confront its past. Tragedy had already struck before the war even ended. In October 1943, the eldest son, Klaus, died in a traffic accident near the family estate after colliding with a delivery truck while riding his bicycle. He was only 10 years old. Lina later spoke of the loss repeatedly, describing it as one of the deepest wounds of her life. Hitler sent condolences. SS officials attended the funeral. Even in grief, the family remained enveloped by the regime's hierarchy. The surviving children would walk very different paths. Reinhard Heydrich, the eldest of the remaining sons, became the most publicly visible in later years. After fleeing to Bavaria in 1945, he completed his education and eventually pursued a career in engineering. For decades, he avoided interviews and declined invitations to discuss his father. Silence, it seemed, was his chosen form of self-preservation. In 2009, he made a rare exception. He agreed to speak with author John Martin for The Mirror Caught the Sun, Operation Anthropoid 1942. In that conversation, Heydrich adopted a defensive tone regarding his father's legacy. 2 years later, in 2011, his name resurfaced when he offered support for restoring the former family residence at Panenské Břežany in the Czech Republic. The proposal sparked immediate reaction. For many Czechs, the property remains inseparable from Heydrich's administration and the brutal repression that followed his rule. Local officials noted that Heydrich had left the estate as a child in 1945 and framed his offer as an attempt to preserve a historical site. Yet public discomfort was palpable. To some, any involvement by the Heydrich family risked reopening wounds. The younger daughters, Silke and Marta, chose quieter lives. Reliable information about Silke remains scarce. An unverified report suggests she may have emigrated to the United States, but no confirmed documentation supports that claim. She has remained absent from public debate. Marte, who now uses the surname Bayer, still lives on Fehmarn. She owns a small clothing shop and avoids interviews. Unlike her older siblings, she never knew her father. In a remark once published in the German magazine Stern, she reflected on the burden of her surname, saying that people cannot imagine what it is like to carry such a name, that it follows her day and night, Within the extended family, perspectives differ. Marte's son, Reinhard, has suggested that no one truly knows the full extent of what his grandfather did. In contrast, Peter Thomas Heydrich, the son of Reinhard's brother Heinz, has publicly expressed regret that Reinhard Heydrich's children never clearly distanced themselves from their father's actions or symbolically acknowledged the suffering associated with his authority. These differing views reveal the complexity of inheritance, not of property, but of memory. What remains clear is this: none of the surviving Heydrich children entered extremist politics or sought to revive their father's ideological world. Unlike their mother, they did not publicly defend